Recording in progress. So this is our chaplain training for 2023, and I am online now with this. And the first subject we'll deal with in this day's instruction is death notification. And I'm going to share the screen now with our death notification module, and there we go. Y'all see that okay?
Yes. Yes, sir.
All right. All right, that's the class, death notifications. It's a very important piece of what we do. And so here's what I present. And I presented this not only to chaplains, but I've shown it to future cops up in the academy and to some other law enforcement types. One was interesting. It was these were guys who were going to handle EMT units, ambulances. They had a new ordinance that said when you had an accident on the road that caused a death, it used to be they'd have to get somebody stacked up in an ambulance, take him to the hospital, and pronounce death at the hospital, so that was where the death was going to be recognized. But instead of that, they made a new law that the EMTs could do it right on the site, which would mean that other people present, the dead guy's relatives, would be notified right at the spot. And that created a whole new dynamic for them. So I was asked to go up to the academy for those guys and give this presentation. So it has been received in various places. At any rate, on script, death is inevitable, but we never seem ready. Death is frightening to hear, but who tells it makes all the difference. Why is this so hard to do? All officers of the law will tell chaplains that death notifications are their least favorite duty, as they only bring sorrow and don't have anything much to offer once the bad news has been delivered. They just don't have the tools. But we can do hard things. We can do the things that are more difficult for them because we do have the tools. As chaplains, when we are, excuse me, just trying to shrink down this thing on my side so I can see what I'm reading. Okay, and Mark is with us now. As chaplains, when we are given the task of delivering a death notifications, we are handed powerful information given to people in an extreme situation. The sheer force of the message we deliver will change someone's life forever. We must not fear death notifications, but we must regard the event with all reverence, humility, and respect. As ministers, we're specially equipped to handle death because we have some sense of it, some purpose, some ultimate end, which other people may not have. Okay. Now, in the death notification, how to start, what to know, and how to proceed. First will come the call. The dispatch will call the chaplain with a request to make a death notification. They'll just say that. Chaplain, I have a death notification. And the chaplain needs to go to the station where he or she obtains a telex transmission from the issuing department. This is usually from another county. The form contains names of the deceased party, the kin or next of kin to be notified, an address, and a telephone. Also, a telephone back to the originating office, say such and such a county, Siskiyou County Sheriff's Department and Coroner's Office. You call that number, there'll be a name of an officer on the telex that you get, and you ask for that person, and then they'll come on the line. I've never really had it fail. They're there, and or you can say, I'm calling about the death of so-and-so. I'm a chaplain with the Butte County Sheriff's Department or the Glenn County Sheriff's Department, and I need to make a death notification. I need to talk to the officer in charge of that one death. So they'll be glad to put you on with them. Then you get as much information as you can, and I'll get to there. The telex will also have the name, I said, and telephone number of the officer requesting the notice. You call that officer to obtain vital information on the death notification. You ask who, where, when, why, and how, all those reporter type questions in order to obtain all the information that's possible. Why do you do that? Well, the police officer that may attend you coming out to make the death notice doesn't do this. He just gets the name and the address, and they go out, and he knows to say, you know, are you the mother of Joe Dokes of Siskiyou County? And she says yes. And then he says, well, he's dead. And he doesn't know much else. We're the chaplains. We're supposed to know more, and we have time to do that. A death notification doesn't have to be done in a real hurry, so making a better job of it is possible. That's why I say go to the station, get the telex, make the phone call, and on the telex form or some other note paper, write down all that you hear. Ask questions. Before you break off contact with your source, make sure you have a clear identification of the victim and the person being notified. The primary persons to be notified will be possibly a spouse or a closest blood relative, a parent or a son or someone like that. And you come there with the full knowledge as to what happened, if it was a kind of death that is being investigated, like the person who died was committing a crime or was drunk or the other things. They may withhold some of that information from you, but you get what they'll give you, and then you bring that with you. And it is part of the ministry, as I'll explain to you in a moment. Now, more to consider. Plan to spend 1 or more hours with the person you're notifying. You may take your own car if that's what's appropriate, or you'll stay with so you can stay after the officer leaves, or you go riding with the officer in the vehicle. The riding with the officer is important sometimes because you need to plan the notification. What are you going to say? Who's going to drop the bomb, you or me? And that's really up to them to say, well, I'll tell them that, and I'll have you along to help with this. They do really appreciate the fact that we've got more information than the bare bones. When we bring it along, it helps to fill out the details, and people want to know. But the officers are not trained in this at all. There's no death notification training, or very little mentioned in their training. And so they go doing the worst thing they can possibly do, which is making somebody's life miserable just by showing up. Ding dong, your son is dead. So do wear your uniform. You may wear the body armor. I say in death notices, it's kind of optional, but you may have a policy with your department one way or the other. It's okay to wear body armor. You're just going to come in and tell somebody something terrible. You assess the medical stability of one whom the news may be broken to. If the person may be so shocked by the death notice that medical treatment may be required, dispatch should make arrangements to have fire department medical personnel on hand. Then you formulate a plan of action. Never make death notifications by telephone. I wrote that in red, so you'll take note. Do not make death notices by phone. Okay. It's a 2-person detail, generally speaking. 1 or 2 cars, as I mentioned. You may park, but not necessarily right in the person's driveway or right in front of the house. We're not calling attention to this, and we're not trying to draw attention from the neighbors on the fact that the cops have shown up to your house. We're not going to arrest anybody. It's just a service done. And you may also need to note the time of day, because during the middle of a work day, they're not going to be at home often. And sometimes you have to make the notification at home or at work, if you can find out where they do work. Time of day also might be the middle of the night. I've done a 2 a.m. death notification of a guy's wife. And that was hard. But you wake up the household. Anyway, you park the police car down the road, not directly in front of the house. The hour doesn't make a difference what hour it is. You just got to do it, but you be sensitive to what the effect of that hour might be. No lights and sirens, of course, naturally. You're not in a hurry to get there. When you make entry, you knock and have the officer introduce him or herself and then introduce you, the chaplain. This is Chaplain Hanson from our department. May we come inside? We have some information to relate. And with all the questions they may ask, well, what's this about and so forth, try to insist to get inside and sit down. We just need to come in and sit down with you and tell you some things. That's all. Nobody's in trouble here. Assess the conditions quickly and try not to answer questions. You want to get into a soft room environment, sofa, living room, family room, soft chairs or sofa. Have them seated, and if possible, below you or even with you, not above you, that you want to be able to control what their reactions might be if it's going to be harmful to them. And you must ask them if there is anyone else in the house and have that person join you. Have everyone above elementary school age come in so that everybody in the house gets the message at once. There's a reason to tell everyone in the house at the same time. If, for instance, you sat down with the parents of the deceased, but the brother of the deceased, who's a kind of a hothead, he's in the other room. He doesn't hear the news, but he comes into the room because they're screaming, and he's going to take it that you've done something bad to his parents, and he's going to go the other way with it. We want him in the room to get the news at the same time, so he can be a benefit and not a detriment to what goes on afterwards. You also must determine if there's any pets, that is like a dog, loose in the house. Have them put in a closed room or outside so that they don't react in such a way because they hear the clamor and think something's really wrong. Okay. Now, when you deliver the word, either the cop or yourself, be direct about it. Tell it using direct words and use the word dead or killed. Don't start with, we're sorry, or we have some bad news for you. You don't start by vaguely mentioning something bad, because they're going to start defending themselves and defend against this news. For an example, you're John Jones, correct? Do you have a son by the name of Edward Philip Jones residing in Livermore with a birth date of May the 25th, 1967? The answer, yes. Your son, Edward Jones, was in a car accident this afternoon that resulted in his death. It isn't kind to mince words here. We always try to soften the words and string it out and kind of move along, but that's a bad thing to do, because the more bad news they get in, the more they're going to try to make it go away. So you want to get this in right away. Your son is dead. Boom. Your son died. The details can come afterwards. They can't handle the details. If you start with details, well, he was driving down the road and he hit a animal and it caused him to deflect off to the side, and he hit on a embankment and it turned over the car, and the ambulance was called. You do that and they start negotiating with the facts that you've given them, and they try to make an outcome be something other than the word dead. So when you finally get to the word dead, they're not hearing you any longer. So you want to get there, and that's actually a kindness, because we need them to know what you're coming for and not to play around with it. So once you drop the bomb, what next? Expect any type of reaction. Limit your communication to the facts. There are absolutely no opinions. You've asked from the guy who sent you the telex, you've asked all the questions, you know all the answers and so forth, but all you give them is the facts. Just the facts, man. There is no way to soften the initial blow of this reality. The straight message gets in. Just use simple everyday words. Big words, soft words, vague expressions confuse the issue. That's not helpful at all. Avoid the jargon such as your daughter was injured fatally, or your mother had a heart attack and was taken by ambulance to the emergency room. They worked on her for over an hour, and I'm afraid she didn't make it. Make what? but now they are negotiating with your first facts. They will ask questions. If you don't know, tell them, I will try to find that out for you. Or an investigation is being made of the incident. Or here is the number of the coroner. You can call him and get that directly from him, if that's okay with you. Absolute honesty may not always be the best way to handle things, but do not make it up. Absolute honesty. You know, he was robbing a bank and he was half crocked on some terrible drug and he tried to kill somebody. You know, you don't necessarily have to share really terrible things, but you will be sharing what's hard enough for this person. We are there to give empathy, not sympathy. Be empathetic. That is, try to understand or feel or sense what they're feeling, so you can work with it, but you're not sympathetic with it. You're not them. You are a stranger. You do not know how they feel. And give no false hopes. The grieving person usually does not want sympathy from strangers. You feel with the person, you get on their level, but do not be some kind of know-it-all. Shared feelings may be most meaningful. In no case should your behavior give cause for false hope. Okay. Then you determine, have they reached closure? Are they quieted down and resigned to the truth? And one way to key in on that is they begin to speak of their loved one in the past tense. He was such a troubled young man. We had always had problems with him, but they're starting to say was instead of is. Then, as the kind of key to all of chaplaincy, when you can't improve on silence, don't. It's okay to be silent. It's okay to not have something to have to say. Sometimes they need a little bit of space to be able to process. Now, I ask if there's a friend or a pastor they could call that could come and be with them for a while. Men and women both need a comfort of an understanding friend. If at all possible, stay until someone arrives. So do you have a pastor or a minister or somebody in the family that you'd like to have me call? That's a kind of a good neutral, covert way to find out if they're people of faith, and that a prayer with them would be appropriate. And you can always ask that. Would it be all right with you if I prayed for your brother? Because we have this situation. And they can tell you no. And in that case, you just offer a silent prayer. Then, of course, don't rush off. Make the phone calls if that's needed. Or you might want to call the sheriff's office, which initiated the report, and help them to talk on your phone, getting more information, see where the body is. They'll usually have a body at some mortuary. So that's an important piece of information for them to get someone else there to help, a neighbor, a friend, a brother, a sister. Don't leave them alone unless they really seem to have it together. You can assess this. This is an important piece of ministry. So don't drop the bomb and turn and walk out. The cops have to kind of do that because that's really all they can do. They can't stay and minister grace to anybody. It's not their job. That's why we're essential in this. You assess the situation and you respond accordingly. And when you know that you're released, you can go. The family may have a question or two as soon as the initial shock can be handled. They will let you know that they are handling it and will most of the time give you the cue in some way that they wish to be alone. No, I'm all right. Thank you very much. I'm all right now. You can go. And that's okay. But you're going to ask, what else can I do? Is there anything else I can do? As I said, ask about a pastor, a priest, or relative and children, neighbors, and make that contact if it's requested. And you may wish to, if you get enough of a relationship going there, to follow up later with a call if that seems appropriate. Give all necessary information to the appropriate person, the coroner's name and phone number, where the body has been taken, as I said, contacting a funeral home if need be, perhaps whether there'll be an autopsy if you know that, and interviews. Okay. So on closure and recovery,
I've got two questions.
go ahead.
So first question is, when you call the family member, friends, whomever, do you just ask them to come over, or would you tell them the information as
I think
cause?
yeah, once you've already given it to a family member like this, I think that's a really good question, because a phone notification isn't that neat, but perhaps you say, just a minute, I'm going to give you to Mrs. So-and-so. She has a request, and she could say, Johnny's dead, and then that's from her, and it's over the phone, but it's got to happen. But maybe you don't do that. Can you come over? I want to have some, I need you here. And then that happens. So, but that's a good question, Jeff. I appreciate that one. Thank you.
Okay, my second question is, I've only had to do this once. I was part of it was called a TIPS program, trauma intervention police. I don't know what it was. But anyway, there was some teenagers that passed away in a car accident. And I went with the cops and did this. So anyway, the police officer, we stepped inside, did the whole thing like you were talking about. Police officer gave the news, and the mom just instantly ran down the hallway into the bathroom and locked the door, and then just was like guttural sobbing, just all this stuff. And then all of a sudden it became an issue of well, what's she doing in the bathroom? Like, like safety, you know what I mean? Because she had locked the door. Like, how would you respond to like something like that when the initial news is done? Like, you've gone into the family room, you've done the informing, and then the response is one where they run into a locked room or bathroom or whatever, and all that stuff happens.
That's a great question too, and I hadn't seen that happen. Certainly it's a question of safety, but and it's a question of personal privacy too. When do you cross from one to the other? I'd say you wait and ascertain if the person is in need of help, or it does not violate anything to ask through the bathroom door. I need to know this, but are you thinking of harming yourself? And if they say, no, I just go away, I just want to cry. Well, okay, then they got the right to do that. But it is appropriate. And we have a whole class on suicide that will talk about what you do when you're dealing with the possibility of a suicide.
What if they're unresponsive? They're just bawling and they don't respond to what you're saying.
Yeah, well, you
give it time, or you just give it time.
Closely. If you hear, pill jars being opened up, you may have to get your little key out and pop the door of the bathroom and say, listen, I'm supposed to make sure that you're okay, and I can't just let you be in here doing what it sounds like, messing with medication. Is it okay what you're doing? Please, you got to address yourself to me a little bit more, because your safety is important to me. But yeah, I haven't faced that. That's a great question. And you may have to take the lead of the officer that you're with. In fact, I would in any case. If it came to the matter of opening the door forcibly, they can do that.
Would you make the would you agree with the fact that, generally speaking, younger people, giving death notices for younger people gives a more like, it's a, I don't know, like if they're older, there's some sense of like, that's, you know what I mean? Where when they're younger, there's a sense that they've been robbed, and
sure,
you know what I mean?
I think we all understand that. I mean, it's not natural for your child to predecease you. It's not what we ever expect in life, and yet, a good portion of the time when I've had to deal with death notifications of a younger person, a child, adult child of one of these folks I'm talking to, there's a track record. There has been some expectation of tragedy surrounding that person because they died in a way. You know, these are not medical deaths of somebody who's been in the hospital for 12 weeks and finally went out. This is a sudden death. That's what we go out for. Right. The medical deaths are notified by phone calls, but these are unexpected deaths. So they're always somewhat jarring. And yet with younger people, if they have been behaving inappropriately, there's going to be knowledge of that. So very often it may surprise you. You'll get the least surprise on the part of parents. In fact, sometimes you'll even get relief that you're bringing the news that this guy has finally hit the wall and it's all over. And they expected this and just have been waiting for the second shoe to drop. It can go either way, Jeff. That's again a great question. Jeff's got good questions, you guys. Thank you for that. Anyway, to recap, closure and recovery begins with the use of the past tense when they start speaking of the person as was instead of is. You may give them a business card. Our Chico Police Department gives our chaplains. I hope your other departments may do the same, or you can just have them printed up. I mean, Vistaprint works cheap. A business card that gives identification so that you can be contacted if they need you, or possibly a grief or support group, literature if you carry that with you. They will get through it, but they'll never get over it. Don't say that. You're not going to get over it, but you'll get through this. And if you need some help, I'm still a police chaplain. I'm happy to help you. We must recognize that people die, but love never dies. Come on, baby. Okay. We are there to provide faith. The facts are cruel. The faith is healing. We really are coming with a dual purpose now. As I mentioned, we call to the sheriff's office or the initiating office to get this kind of information. Our police officer doesn't carry all that with him. After he's maybe dropped the bomb and said, you know, your son has died in a vehicular accident, and they'll say, well, where was it? And, you know, I'll say, well, it was on Highway 90. So the chaplain who has this stuff in his hand say, well, he was on Highway 95, and it was rather late at night, and we're not sure how it happened, but it was a single car rollover, and it looks like it was pretty instant. So there may not have been any suffering, or whatever you need to say. If it's true, you're reporting what was reported to you. You don't make it up. They may ask you, well, do you think you went to heaven? You're going to get that. But these are home death situations. People are going to want to impress upon you their firm belief that this guy went to heaven. And you may not be convinced of that, but it is something you don't offer an opinion on. You know, we're not in charge of heaven or the gates and who gets in. You can just say, well, that's something to pray for. I'll certainly pray for that. And you're neutral. And as strangers, we cannot give sympathy, but we can give a wealth of compassion and selfless service to them. And the follow-up. If they do want it, you handle a memorial service or something, a funeral, anniversary, occasional call, just to talk. Okay. Some special circumstances. You may have to notify at work. I've had to do that. So you have to call to their boss, ask for the manager who is not this person that you're notifying, and have him to go to secure some kind of a private room in the facility where the man works, or the woman works. And he is to say nothing except that there are some people here waiting with some important information for you. He doesn't relate it, but he would got to call the boss and say, I've got a death notification to make to your employee. Do you have a place I can meet with them? And he'll say yes. So you get into that room and then you proceed as you would at home. At someone else's home, if they're visiting someone else, speak to the home or host to the homeowner first. Again, have arrangements made for some privacy in a soft room. Have the host join you when you notify them so that everybody in the house, as I say, gets the news at once. I have made a death notification in the hospital with somebody in the bed. You got to make the notification in a private waiting room or maybe even their hospital room, but you do it with the advice of the staff and the doctor that this person is not too delicate to receive bad news.
Hey, Peter, a question.
Yes, Danny.
So what happens if you don't know where the person is? They're not at home. They might be out shopping. They're visiting a friend, or something you don't know. And if you call their cell phone, do you just use words like "There's been an incident. We need to talk to you. Where are you?" Or what do you do?
You don't do the contact. The cops do that. Okay. But they sometimes have to try 2 or 3 times before they can make the notification. It may even cycle out to another day and another chaplain. It can happen that they're just not able to be reached, or that you got to go back several hours later and do it again. It is difficult sometimes, especially as I say, if it's the working day and you don't know where the person works. And so you figure to cycle back around 5 o'clock and catch them as they're getting home. But you're right. That's a difficulty. And it caused me to do something really stupid once. I think it may come up on the slide, but I'll say it now. I was riding with a female officer in our department, and we got sent out to make a death notification. We were ready to do it as normally. This guy's mother in some other county had died. Just a medical death, but he wouldn't have known about it, like a heart attack or something. So we go to the house. He's not there. We go walk around the house. No sign of anybody, probably working. We don't know where he works. So she left her card on the house, the front of the house, and I left my card too. And here's where leaving a card can add some difficulties. The next morning, there was nothing called back out. I was not asked to get back out with her later. I figured it must have got handled. So the next day, like at 10 in the morning, I get a call from this gentleman, and I recognized the name. He said, "I found your card on the front of my house. I was wondering what this is about." I said, oh, it's about your mom. I figured he's got to know by now. He said, "My mom, what's wrong with my mom?" And I went, "Oh, crime. Oh no, I'm doing it wrong. I'm on the telephone." And I said, "I am so sorry. I did not mean to do it this way. I thought that this would have already gotten to you." I was surprised that the officer and the dispatch weren't keeping after doing this death notification, but I made an assumption. So I made a death notification on the phone, and he was pretty distraught about it. But I apologize profusely for having to do that, and learn something. Never presume that it's been done without you. Just stop what you're doing. You're in the middle of your day. Say, "Listen, can I come over?" Now, I'm not in uniform. I've not been dispatched by the police department. I'll have to call the police department and say, this guy has just called about this death, and I don't know if he knows or not. But he's found my card. It really kind of makes it awkward. But you got to handle that very carefully. Okay. If there are multiple deaths in a single family, a whole car gets destroyed. I'll tell you, that's not unknown. One winter we had a couple of deaths that involved people who lived right next to me in California Park up here in Chico. And the second one had to do with my neighbor, who was a drunk, and she had lost her license but was borrowing the car from her boyfriend in Sacramento. Nice lady with a couple of teenage kids. And on a Friday night, she got herself drunk and got into the car that she'd borrowed and was driving down 149, the old 149 that was just 2 lanes. And she crossed the road to pass cross the double yellow line to pass a truck that was in the way. It was dusk. It was slightly misty. She didn't see the oncoming car that she hit head on and killed a family of 4. She killed the entire family, and she herself didn't die. Now, somewhere, somebody's going to have to pick up where that family relatives are and be able to tell them that 4 people have died in a car accident due to a drunken driver. The size of that, haven't had to handle that, but it would be beyond belief, right? Some of these death notifications are harder for us to give than others are, and it's really hard. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that. Mark, you've made death notifications in San Diego County, and I don't know if you've had multiple deaths to report at any time.
Not necessarily multiple in a single family, but multiple deaths out of one incident, yes.
Yeah.
So basically going from house to house type of thing.
Yeah, not an easy do. It spends your stuff, and you may be running out of grace. This is one thing that might, like we say, having to go house to house at a time like that. If you see the ministry getting big, too big for your plate, call another chaplain, have them come out and join you. There's nothing wrong with doing that if you're overloaded, because this stuff can take its toll on you. It's pretty hard to do. Okay, I'm not sure that this is really presumed dead. Not sure where to go with this. Body unidentifiable without identification might be presumed by witnesses, circumstances, so and so. I'm not going to answer that. I'm not even sure what I meant to say there. I don't think I initiated that problem. Okay, there are special kinds of death that take a special kind of notification, and one of them is obviously suicide. There are unique things about suicide. You need to help the survivors understand that they are not guilty. With other kinds of deaths, obviously, people won't be trying to do this. But when a loved one has killed himself or herself, the remaining family alive starts to ask the question, could I have done something to cause them to do this? Or did I fail to do something that I should have? Did I fail? Did I not recognize the signs? Did I do something? And they are feeling guilty. You need to try to get them to where they understand that they are not guilty. There are too many questions that ask that question why that will never be resolved. That's something I always tell suicide survivors. The suicide leaves us with questions that can't be answered. It will never be answered, and don't beat yourself up for that. This is normal with an abnormal event like this to ask why, but you're not going to get an answer, and you're going to have to learn to be okay with that. Suicide notes also are not explanations necessarily. They are messages. They can be quite mean sometimes, or they can just be wrong. So they don't necessarily tell you the whole story, but they give you an inkling about it. Suicide, we understand, is ultimately a selfish act, the ultimate rejection of others, of help, of love, of the rest of us. Suicide is not a destiny, it's a choice. And the survivors did not make that choice for the deceased. Survivors have anger due to the fact that there is no explanation. They're going to be angry, sorrowful, guilty, all kinds of things. And they're trying to get an explanation. They're trying to fit something into a place that won't fit. Suicide is also embarrassing. It's socially unacceptable. A suicide means a weakness, a failure on somebody's part, and that embarrassment can cause somebody tremendous strain. It's not your fault, is what they must learn to accept, and they will believe you if you continue to let them know this is not your fault. You need to defuse them. They will feel more in control, which they feel they've lost. So basically, they are going around trying to resolve this thing, and they're like a lit bomb. You have to undo all that and get them to recognize that stasis is a place where unknowing has to be okay. They're going to ask you if they went to heaven or hell. A suicide was used to be in religious circles an automatic go to hell card. We can't give false hope, but I don't know is a good answer. I don't know. That's something beyond my ability to say. I just know that God is good, he's merciful, and he can forgive a lot of things. And I hope that he's forgiven this. If they don't have the Lord, this is a hard one because it looks to them like a blank wall and an end of things. You can offer prayer if they won't take it. You can give it. You can console. Just don't patronize them. And we don't believe, I think I won't get an argument here from the rest of you, we don't believe in universal salvation. Everybody goes to heaven. So you don't offer that kind of panacea. The suicides, though, are often done in some kind of an altered mental state, a sickness. And God does not condemn people for dying from sickness, even if it's mental sickness. The Lord knows that. You can offer that and say, here's a situation where God is merciful and I believe in him. So let's just pray for this poor soul and try to leave it there. Okay, some things not to say at a death notification. Are there any questions? First of all, I'll open the field to that.
I'm with you on that, Peter, because I've had to deal with suicides with my mother and some other ones that knew the Lord. But I believe what you stated is that mental sickness is a sickness.
Yes.
And they don't know how to overcome the enemy. And I used to believe just what you said, that it was an automatic, but the Lord knows all of us, and his grace is sufficient in every circumstance.
Yeah, that's right. I had a very good friend who killed himself, and he had been in the agricultural chemical business. And I was learning after the fact that there were a lot of people who handle those kind of chemicals who then sometimes subsequently committed suicide. It was like something that affected their brains. And his partner tried to kill himself too. And really, with their families as they were, there was really no reason. It wasn't something like he'd say, "Oh, of course that's why he killed himself." He just didn't know. And he had also just been prescribed some antidepressants. And if you don't know antidepressants, they can cause somebody to trigger a suicide. When you're depressed, you feel like killing yourself, but you can't get the energy up to do it. You just don't feel that, because it takes quite a bit of impetus to get you going to actually actively kill yourself. But they can't do it. If they get the antidepressant, they can feel good enough to go ahead and pull the trigger. That's a surprise, but sometimes that medication can't. I'm not speaking against antidepressants, but it's a caution that must be taken, that that can be a cause. Now, is that ruled out of God's mercy? I don't think so. I think that there are strong powers that work against us. I'm sorry to hear about your mom, Kenny. That's got to be a big one. All right.
That's where
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to make a comment in regards to, you made a statement about not necessarily trying to convince them, but letting them know that what has happened is, they're going to get through it, and that they're going to question this. So, what more could they have done? That's not going to happen in a single sitting. Okay, Bishop knows my situation.
Yes.
My wife and I lost our son back in 2017 to suicide, and it was quite a long time. I still occasionally have issues where I still question myself, what more could I have done? And that is something that we knew he was depressed, and we knew that he had actually made a statement to me previous, probably was about 6 months before it happened. And, he and I talked and thought we got through it and things like that. So after it did happen, it was one of those, for me, questioning, well, what more could I have done? What else should I have done? And that's going to be one of those things that's going to take quite a long time for those individuals to come to that realization, if they ever do. And that's one of the big things. I mean, I understand the position as a chaplain, going out and making that notification and things like that, but just realize that you're not going to be able to be there long enough to, it's going to take months before they actually come to that realization, if they ever do, like I said.
Yeah, when we go out, this is triage. This is first treatment only. You can't deal with the entire person. You may, if you establish enough of a contact, get some continuity that may do some follow-up. But primarily, we're trying to hold them together so they can get through the first shocks and have some equipment to deal with the next ones. And that's about it. It's important.
99% of us will not know that person at all.
That's it. That's it. Quite true. Now as I said, we're going to deal with a whole suicide class. So lots of questions about suicide are going to come up again. I don't want to tamp it down, but it is going to be dealt with more fully later on. Please know that. All right. Well, we don't want to say to people who just lost a loved one, be strong for your children. That kind of admonition, or any kind of admonition, is not our place. You got to get a hold of yourself. It's nature's way, or this must be God's will. Shut up. Buck up. You're young. You'll make a life for yourself. Time will heal all this. Look around. You're not the only one going through this. Any of this sound pretty terrible? I hope so. You need to stop reliving the past. Or only the good die young. You need to count your blessings. Think of your precious memories. God needed him more than you needed him. I know you've all heard this. God must have had some plan for him up there, and so he called him out of this world. Do not make God the henchman. He's not that. He's not the executioner of your loved one. That's a terrible message. He's happy now that he's with God. Well, God willing, he is, but heavens, I know how you feel. You don't know how they feel. If there's anything you need, just call. Now that's okay to say, just mean it. If you don't mean that, don't offer that. What you don't know won't hurt you. Well, you still have 2 other children, or you can have more children. Bad stuff. Okay. That's what not to say. Grieving. It's a natural process. Nobody gets over the death of a loved one. They just learn to live with it. And a chaplain is not around long enough to do the long-term work. We're there at the crisis point. It's essential that we do the most good and to do no harm. There's a whole science in grieving, but we don't have a long time to do that. Don't be surprised. The chaplain will be affected by what he or she communicates, and it will suddenly hit us. Some deaths will hit us harder than others. Talk it over with your fellow chaplains in a debriefing. We have a monthly debriefing meeting and planning meeting for our chaplains at Chico. And anything that you've done in the field, we ask for you to review it with all of us. That helps to both educate us on what things can happen out there, but also helps you kind of unload some of that stuff, because we carry it around kind of secretly and don't share it with the world. They won't understand, but it's something we give to each other, and when we've shared it, it's less of a burden on us. I had a death notification one time, middle of the night, as I mentioned, about 2 o'clock in the morning, to tell a guy his wife was dead in a single person rollover death incident out west of Chico. And he explained to us as we got there, he reacted. He had kind of expected this was what was happening, that she had an accident, she was dead, he couldn't contact her. And she took I guess that the married couple each had a night in the month that they'd go out with their drinking buddies and gamble and drink and go to the casino. She went alone to the casino, got too drunk, and left the road and died. And this is the stuff we're dealing with. But here I start to ask myself, how would I like it if some chaplain knocks at the door one day to say, "Ding dong, your wife has died." And that I was relating to the guy I'm talking to in a way that I started feeling it near, kind of getting close to me. And I thought, wow, okay, I see how this can affect you. Other situations weren't hitting me so much at home, but this one I didn't want to have happen. Not that my wife goes out drinking once a month, but just the sense that somebody could come and tell me this news was hard. So don't be surprised if it's hard. Okay. Opening for questions, more questions, or else we'll take about a 3 or 4 or 5 minute snack time.
So Peter, in Butte County, our sheriff deputies do the death notification.
Yes.
And we get a call if the deputies call for that, or the people call for that.
You guys are so spread all over huge distances. It's a big deal to mobilize a chaplain when an officer is already out there. It's a different scenario. So, I mean, you got to follow your own departmental thing. And I suppose Glenn County.
Well, we've never done it yet. So,
yeah. In Chico, we have the protocol to call a chaplain in for death notification, but Chico's 10 minutes across in any direction. So it's not that hard for us to mobilize. When we're on duty, we're on call for that very purpose. So, and of course, you guys don't cover the Chico City for that purpose, because we've got, police officers in here to do that. The way our paths do cross is whenever there's a death in the home, which we're going to get to 11:44. The police come, but then the sheriffs come to do that portion of the work anyway. Okay, I don't need to go into that. All right, everybody okay?
yeah.
Why don't we go to, all right, gentlemen, we are going to go back into the second class for today, which is a class in confidentiality and legal liabilities for chaplains. It's an important class because I think we know something about confidentiality when we're in ministry, but I never learned half as much in learning ministry from the seminary than I did when I got into chaplaincy, and I learned all the parameters of confidentiality. I'll stop at certain stop points too and make sure that you get a chance to ask questions. Questions have been very good. Okay, Mark is back in. All right, Mark, welcome back in. We're just starting up with confidentiality, and I think we're all here. Now, keeping secrets. There is confidentiality and there is confidentiality. One is a legal issue, the other a personal understanding. It's crucial to any chaplaincy that we understand the nature of confidential information and we abide by its guidelines. There are many secrets involved in policing. There's all kinds that you're never going to know. Anytime an officer gets into trouble with the police department and he's put into some sort of a special investigation, that whole thing's sealed. You're never going to find out what was undercover there. But police themselves go undercover. They have secret raids that are not made public. Some of you may know BNTIF. That's a Butte County organization that's multiple law enforcement agencies working together for drug enforcement. I've been on a BNTIF raid. It's kind of fun, or it was this time. There's legal discovery. Every law enforcement action has the potential of a lawsuit following, and discovery must be done in special ways. Investigations are kept secret in order to protect evidence from contamination. Everybody knows that in their department they got an evidence section, and that has a bunch of lockers that can't be accessed except when you log in and log out, so that the possession of that evidence has a direct trail, and nobody was able to get at it and pervert it. The rights of all parties must be respected. The rights of privacy from undue public knowledge of criminal involvement, etc., must be respected and kept private. But most particularly, the law enforcement officer must be protected. And in our role as a law enforcement chaplain, we must avidly protect officers from exposing their lives to criticism and undue scrutiny. We're part of their privacy chain. It is a requirement for a chaplain to be an ordained or licensed minister of a recognized religious body. I can't have anybody added to the chaplaincy who is not that. That's in order to create the possibility of a legal confidentiality in a communication with them. Privileged communications protect an officer from undue scrutiny and discipline from testimony that could be compelled from a chaplain with whom he has had a private conversation. There are two distinct kinds of private communications that we as chaplains may have with our officers. First of all, just casual conversations, disclosures while riding along, and acts committed by an officer that we witness may not be legally concealed by us under some kind of an assumption of confidentiality. We can be compelled by a court to tell what we saw, what we heard. That's when there is no agreement to confidentiality. Not everything an officer does in our presence is confidential. But it is important, and I want to underscore this, it's important that we maintain a level of privacy nonetheless. We cannot become blabbermouths, telling every conversation we've had with officers to others in the department, and certainly not to anyone else. When word should get back to an officer that your ride-along became the subject of discussion, you can forget ever receiving any more information from him, or perhaps from any other officer that's of a highly sensitive nature. You've got to keep a lot of that to yourself because the officer is counting on you to do that. Then there's legal confidentiality. The other kind of this is legal clergy professional area, commonly known as the priest or pastor and penitent privilege communication. The same protection that covers the matters discussed in a confession to a priest with an inviolable seal, what we in the biz call the purple stole, extends legally today to all ministers and representatives of churches and religious bodies, while in a counseling mode where the misdeeds of the counselee have been admitted to the professional in private with a reasonable expectation of confidentiality. Sorry. A reasonable expectation The term reasonable expectation of privacy or confidentiality is a legal establishment of what circumstances may establish a privilege of secrecy. The law has etched out a valid turf in which we may enter confidential communications, but it is imperative that all chaplains know when, where, and how to do so. It's important that something of a formal agreement be made between the chaplain and the officer or member of the public, that what you are entering into is a confidential communication, not subject to production as evidence. There's no court that can force you to divulge. If an officer enters into a sensitive subject and seems to want to consult you as a private counselor, well, then you want to find out if this is what he wants. Establish a legal confidence. Make clear whether he or she wants this to be a confidential conversation. Find out what the matter pertains to. Determine whether you want to enter this confidentiality. Now that's important. I'll underscore this. Then you hear the communication, you counsel with them, you pray. Then you recommend or direct as you feel it prudent for the ending of the conversation. This is like a confession where the discipline follows the confession and absolution. You are saying, now here's what I want you to do before we leave this confidentiality. I want you to agree with me to do such and such because you come to me for counsel. I'm giving you my counsel and I want you to do this thing. Will you do it? And then see how they react. The other party holds the privilege now. That is, it's up to them whether you can speak or not speak. Only he or she may open another discussion of that subject with you. You can't go to them and say, remember that conversation we had? Billy, could you put your thing on mute? So thank you. You may not even go to them and ask to talk about it. It's not open. If they come to you, that's another matter. If they've said, come to me later and talk about it, then they've given you that permission. If you are called into a court, you must invoke the privilege and decline to give evidence. That's your God-given right. Now, I've kind of run through that. Maybe I should not. Maybe in the slides I'll get later to this. But it is really, really important to note that we hold the right to say yes or no on a confidential communication. If the officer says after the fact, hey, everything I just told you is confidential, right? It may or may not be okay with you to be held in confidentiality. You did not agree to it yet. It is something you can say, I'm really sorry, but we didn't establish that before this conversation began. I'll hold this in confidence as much as I feel is appropriate, but I'm not bound by confidentiality in that you only ask me that after the fact. You have that right. I think I'll get into more specifics later, but it's important to note you hold the right to say yes or no to confidentiality. And the officer, after that's been agreed to, then the officer holds you to privacy. Now, scenarios, what would you do?
Peter, I'm
Yes.
sorry, this is Danny. A question on what you said, something you said on the slide, that if like you can't even approach the person again to talk about it.
That's right.
If somebody, if we're hoping the Glenn County chaplain program will get to as evolved as what yours is, where you're meeting with the officers and all of that. If somebody says something to you in confidence, you can't call them a week later to ask how they're doing, how that's going.
You can certainly make contact and say how you doing, and leave the then be quiet and see if they bring it up. But if they don't bring it up, you can't bring it up. If they at the time of the conversation and before you close the confidential communication, you say, would it be all right if I brought this up to you in a week or so and found out how you're doing? Give me the permission to do that now, and I'll exercise that. But if you don't do that, you don't have the right to broach the subject with them if they don't.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay. An officer asks to see you privately on the condition of confidentiality. You agree, and he confesses to having an adulterous affair. Okay, let's walk through this one. The officer says, I need to speak confidentially to you, Officer Danny, or Chaplain Danny. I got some private problems, and I just wanted to have some conversation. Is it okay if we do this in private? There are some things you may want to clear with him, first of all, such as if this is a mandated reporter situation, and they'll know immediately what that means. Is there anything to do with this that what might cause me to have to exercise mandated reporting? No, it's nothing like that, which this situation would not have anything to do with. So then you go, okay, sure, let's get in private. Now, it's important that if you get into a private conversation, it's private. If you're in any place at all where it can be overheard by others, you don't have a private conversation, and you don't have the possibility for confidentiality. You want to enter into it in utter privacy. There's no such thing as 3 persons present and a confidential communication. So you get private with them, you say, okay, and then they tell you the story. I don't know which way to go with this. My wife and I really haven't been, I don't know, whatever the deal is. Okay, how would you carry that further? Anybody got an idea?
Would you make suggestions to help them?
That's what he's asking for, isn't it? If he's come to you just to tell you this, it's not just to brag. This girl's really good looking. No, he's in trouble. So it is to be assumed. You might ask that question. Are you looking for my suggestions or my counsel? That's really what it is. Are you looking for counsel on this? If there's any way, shape, or form for you to get out of this adulterous affair, do it now. She knows what she's doing. She's in the middle of a marriage here. She understands her ambiguity in the situation, and that you are already married. I can't counsel you to divorce or to break up a marriage. And if you're possibly going to be divorced no matter what, because you have a really unworkable marriage and you got a really terrible problem with your wife, you need to resolve that before you're free to engage in anybody else's life and give them anything that's worthwhile, don't you think? Or something like that. You give them the idea. Then something very important is that while they have a power, that is, the communicator has a power over you to keep you silent, you have a power over them because they've sought you out as their confederate here to say, I'm going to put some spiritual disciplines on you. I'm going to ask you to act in such and such a way. Now, this is with prayer and understanding that you're taking some liberties here, but like I say, break it off with the girl for now. Get counseling with your wife. If you can resolve it, it's the healthier way to go. But if you cannot, then resolve that right there first. Be in a marriage or out of the marriage or something clear. And you understand me? So you have some power there, and you should utilize it because they've asked you for that. I'd say that's fair to say. We'll get some more examples of that. All right. Now, while you're riding with an officer, she asks you what you think of the new police chief. What do you say? Well, so what do you think? What do you make of our new chief?
Always be positive.
I think that's good advice. And or turn it around. So what do you think of him? Oh, I don't know. What do you think of him? Well, I think this guy is really over the top. Oh, how's that? And maybe at some point that she wants to voice her opinions, but doesn't want to have to come back on her. And then I think, if you feel like it, you can say, well, I can field private conversation there. I think in any case, you would keep what she says private because she doesn't need this reflecting back on her. So you're there for her, not to save the department from some person who's unhappy with the chief. There's always somebody unhappy with the chief. An officer attempts to get your sympathy with the Police Officers Association, the union, against the administration. What do you say? I've had this happen. Not much you can do actually with the POA or the chief or anybody in the administration. Not much.
Isn't part of our role is to not take sides on any of this?
I would say so. It's good.
We're there to serve the entire department, not just the chief or that officer or the union reps or whatever, right? I mean, we can't take sides at all. It's the same thing with pastoring our church. We have to not take any sides like that, except the biblical side.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair to say. So these are fairly straightforward answers. All right, an officer admits to committing sexual acts with a minor. It seems to be a habit, but you can't determine that. You haven't yet invoked confidential communication. What do you say?
I know that in every other setting, we have to report that.
Yeah. And you're remembering this as a guy who's carrying a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Just, obviously we can't imagine all the ways that this may be twisted, but I would expect if the officer is telling you this much, he's looking for some sort of help or some sort of something. And it's very dangerous to enter into that conversation because you're going to have to say, I'm going to have to tell somebody about this, or you understand this is going to have to go somewhere. It can't be, you can't have done this and live with yourself and go on with this. Yeah, of course, it's a mandated reporting situation anyway, even though this is my kind of a favorite one. An officer tells you some things that cause you to question her sanity. Ta-da. At the end of the conversation, she invokes confidential communication by saying, now, Chaplain, you can't tell anybody about this. You understand? She is armed. So what do you say?
Maybe just agree. Sure, no problem. That's just between us. And then the next thing you do, you get a hold of somebody that can do it and get help.
Well, now, if you said no problem, it's okay with me, you've just agreed to a confidential communication and you can't say anything to anybody, because that's really legally binding on you. It's morally binding on you. She's asked after the fact, it's not really appropriate. She can't bind you with that right then, but you're going to have to decide how to best deflect this situation and say, you're so funny. Like, oh, you crack me up. Or something like that, to be able to let her know, kind of deflect this question so that you don't end up saying yes when you really know you got to say no. Yeah. But she's armed. Okay. Now, some further definitions and so forth. Not all conversations are privileged, and the statutes usually identify the limits of this. First, statutes typically provide that the person must be a clergyman, that's us, or at least one acting in such a capacity. Usually a reasonable belief on the part of the penitent that the other person is a clergyman. will legally suffice. Now, we make sure that we are really clergymen in this trade. Second, the privileged communications must be to a clergyman who is acting in his professional capacity. It's not just the fact that you do that for a living. It's you're actually on the job. Random conversations with clergy are not necessarily protected. I've had people try to invoke confidentiality after the fact, in fact, at a much later time. Well, that was a confidential communication and you violated it. You don't understand what confidentiality is. It's got to be established at the time and understood by both parties, or you don't enter into it. Third, the courts have held the communication must be penitential in nature. Now, note that. That is, it must be a confession, or it must be an admission of a problem, of failure, trouble in my life. I need help with this. I'm not doing well. So it isn't coming to you to tell you how good his girlfriend looks and keep you silent about that. This is penitential. Generally, the tendency has been to broaden the privilege to include other situations beside a traditional confession. Counseling would work. Significant role of pastors in general counseling, especially marriage counseling, has resulted in having these included in non-confessional communications. Okay, so we understand that. It's broader than just making a confessions per se. All right. Fourth, a number of state statutes have requirements that the communication be pursuant to a discipline enjoined by the rules of the church. That is, confession must be in respect to a religious duty set forth by the doctrine of the church mandating such confession. Such requirement reflects a more narrow view of the privilege and roots it not in general policy of protecting spiritual counsel, but in the First Amendment protection against government interference in religious duties. In other words, you got to be involved with the church to do this kind of confidentiality. It's like, you know, there are lawyers, there are bankers, there are doctors, and people such as that who are in professions that can be bound by confidentiality, and we are too as ministers. It's recognized under law, but it is in connection with our religious duties, however that is. Now, few privileges are absolute, and this general protection of confidentiality and privilege is under some challenge. Are there exceptions to the privilege? Child abuse. We may have to keep secrets for those engaged in and continuing in abuse of minors. A minor is anyone under 18 years of age. Abuse means sexual contact, physical harm, emotional harm. It may break our hearts, but mandatory reporting laws do not extend at the current time, as I understand it, in California, to ministers, as it does to counselors, teachers in schools, and so forth, where if they see evidence of something abusive, they are required by law. They don't have discretion. They must, in fact, report it, and that's pretty tough. This is California Penal Code. A clergy member who acquires knowledge or a reasonable suspicion of child abuse or neglect during a penitential communication is not subject to subdivision A, which is the mandatory reporting rule. Penitential communication is defined then, and has a duty to keep those communications still secret. So for our particular function, we're not in the mandatory reporting rule. I would nevertheless, in entering into communication with an officer that sounds like it's going in that direction, I would say I'm required by law to report anything that's in the area of child or elder abuse. And so please understand that. Now, they may or may not know the rule on that, but I don't want to be holding one of those kinds of secrets and have to stuff it. That's just my way. Elder abuse is a little bit broader than child abuse. It's physical abuse, inflicting physical pain or injury on a senior, sexual abuse, non-consensual sexual contact of any kind, neglect, failure to provide food or shelter, health care or protection for a vulnerable elder, exploitation, the illegal taking of funds or property or the assets of a senior. God, I have seen that happen. Emotional abuse, inflicting mental pain, anguish, or distress on an older person, or abandonment, the simple desertion of a vulnerable elder. Those can all be mandatory reported to the elder, what is it called? Well, adult protection. That's what that is. In the county, there's adult protection office. Again, a mandated reporter who is a clergy member who acquires knowledge of elder or dependent adult abuse is not subject to paragraph 1, which is, again, the mandatory reporting. I don't care. I think I'm going to make that known to them. If you're going to enter into elder or child abuse situations, that is something I would be forced to report. But I'm going to tell them that ahead of time before they enter into communications.
So question.
Yes, please.
Who do you report that to? To the head chaplain, to one of your sergeants, or who do you report that to?
That's a really good question, because we're under a number of disciplines there. The it may be just the agency that handles this kind of thing, an adult protection agency or a child protection agency, and say, I don't know if there's something here, but this is what has been said to me, this is what I noticed, and this is the identifications of the parties, or I don't know that. Now, here's a situation where we're kind of at arm's length away from the circumstance and may not know names and locations, and it's kind of hard to ask if you're in that sensitive a situation. I haven't been in this situation, but it would be difficult to know who we're reporting on or for. So I'd say, yeah, your senior chaplain, your police liaison would be someone to start with, and then get some better information as you go forward. Because it's really hard, like I say, it's really hard to report the abuse of an unknown person. And that's probably what it's going to result from. You know who the officer is, but you don't know who the child or the elder is, most likely. And yeah, that's a tough one. But again, it's not happened to me, so I haven't had to handle the permutations of this. We're ministers in a police world here, and there's going to be a lot of situations like this where we are going to have to prayerfully find our way through it in an uncommon territory, doing things that we are not used to doing. And so use the resources that you have, your chief chaplain, your liaison, first and foremost, and they know how to keep secrets, so that they protect the rights both of the possible abuser as well as the abused. Now, an officer reporting on him or herself as an abuser of children or elders, if confidentiality has already been established, will be able to rely on the clergy person to keep the secret if you haven't opened that door for yourself beforehand and said, if there is a mandated reporting situation here for elders or children, I'm going to leave my way open to have to report this. If that's okay with you, go ahead and tell me what you're going to tell me. And if they say, yeah, it's nothing to do with that, okay, well, then we're cool. But this is difficult. You are there not to inform on your officer, but to aid him or her through the crisis to a better life. They come to you for that. Yours is a role of spiritual direction and discipline. So exercise your role. You're not commanded to just give them a pass. in my church, I'm an Anglican, I can hear confessions and grant absolutions and do disciplines within that context. And it's really important not to feel like you're forced to, by the officer role that you have, to just give absolution. Well, God forgives you and bye-bye. Because sometimes they're not really penitent. They aren't sorry for any of this. They just want a freebie. They'll tell you they hurt somebody, ha ha ha. And you don't give absolution for that. You do have power to exercise the idea that this is not available to them yet. They got a ways to go yet. Yours is the role of spiritual direction and discipline. It's different where there is a threat of a future crime. The standards of child or elder abuse extends to those with mental disability. We unfortunately had a situation where one of our chaplains was sexually using somebody with a mental disability, and that chaplain lost his post with us in our department. So a duty to inform. Before you accept the role as a receiver of confidential communication, it is your duty to inform the officer that this privilege means you are not obligated to hear the confidential communication. This is up to you whether or not you enter into it. Once it's been granted, you're subject to keep the confidence. Okay. After the fact, an officer has no right to expect your agreement to keep silent after hearing or witnessing a criminal act or words that may give evidence to a crime simply by invoking confidentiality after the fact. That's too late. You didn't agree to that. And so you maintain your right. Just saying this is confidential doesn't close the issue. Okay. Important to know. And witnesses. Also, in the presence of any other party to the alleged confidential communication, it voids the rights of the speaker to hold you to silence. Confidentiality means you alone heard this disclosure. If you had reasonable ability to assume that you were in confidence. Now, if there's a third party listening over a wall, that confidence can still be held on you, even though somebody else knows it. But if there's knowledge that there's a third party present, there can be no confidentiality. Okay. Without confidential communication. As chaplains, we're going to see and hear a lot of things, many that will shock or displease us. Sometimes they're just funny. And we just keep it quiet. Word that you have ratted out your officer on a ride-along gets around, and they're all going to be very quiet to you afterwards. I had an officer, just as an example, I'm doing a ride-along, and this officer stopped for a car that looked kind of funny, and it was full of laundry and just up to the roof inside. And he went back to the back plates and peeled off a renewal tag that was on the license. Stickum wasn't sticking, so this was a stolen one that had been readhered to this woman's license. And then this Hispanic woman comes out and claims that this is her car, and he gives her a pretty hard time. And maybe appropriately, she was doing illegal things, and she had all this stuff in her car, and he obviously didn't like her. But there was no arrest or anything that was done, but he gave her some strong admonitions. Then as he got in the car, he said, Hitler wasn't wrong about everything. And I sat there in that car and went, oh God, oh man, I don't like this. This man really needs to retire. I think he's gone past his sell-by date, and he could be dangerous in the field. And I had to hold that opinion. I didn't go blab it over the department, but it was something I needed to know. This guy was in some trouble. Okie doke. I am open to questions, everybody.
So what happens, what do you do in a scenario where you're counseling an officer and they mention, how grief stricken they are because they've done something illegal, you know,
Yeah.
hid evidence or, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Is it because it was in confidence, you established confidentiality.
Right.
Do you counsel them to go admit their mistake and take their punishment? But you can't say anything to anybody, right?
That's correct. Yeah. If this is completely out of the realm of mandated reporting, we're just talking about they committed a crime, like you say, maybe handled some evidence improperly. You would say this is great. That's a great and really to the point of this kind of communication. The power we have over them is in counseling. It's not in going somewhere else and causing something to happen. If you'd like me to go along with you, officer, to see, the professional standards sergeant, I will. We can have that conversation if it's your desire to have me in the room. But in any case, I'm available to you through this situation. But obviously, it's trying on your conscience right now. You're not able to live with it, and you're not going to be a good officer to swallow this down and say, "Well, I guess I won't do it again." You need to have this cleared, I think. But I'm not going to do anything about it to you, and I'm not going to report you because that was our agreement. You will not hear anything coming out of me about this. Just do understand that. But I'm here as a resource for you, and I'm telling you, you probably ought to go into your sergeant or the professional standards officer and make it known to them and say, I was wrong. I was trying to do this or that, or trying to cover for my partner. I think something else went on, and step on through that. You may be disciplined. I don't know. You could lose your job. But I think you need to be able to live with yourself. This was a serious enough matter for you to bring to me, and I can't really tell you, forget it, you're all right. That doesn't sound so bad. Yeah.
Okay.
What do you want me to do? Sure. We are there. Obviously, we're there as the moral upholders of things. That's how they kind of deal with us. That's why when we come into the briefing room in the morning, they go, "Oops, the chaplain's here. Watch your language," which they do for about 30 seconds, and then then the F-bombs come back in. But that's their language, and you're not worried about that. It's not your job. So, okay. Any other question anybody has? Well, that's good. We're getting these done in an hour or less a piece, and I'm happy to do that. Read over the material. If you have any further questions, contact me. Otherwise, gentlemen, we will see you all in a week.
All right.
Cool?
Thanks. Have a great week, everyone. God bless.
Have a great week. Oh, you
Thanks,
know what?
Peter.
Let me offer a prayer here. I just was saying this before we started out, because
for Israel.
yeah. Dear Lord God, it's a hard subject to be able to ask intelligently about. Israel was hit with a very evil, very vile, almost insane attack this month, and it's inconceivable for us to know how Israel can deal with it other than a incredibly strong and powerful all-out assault. And yet it's hard for us to pray for that to be successful only when there are so many people and even innocent people involved in the response. We don't have an answer. We don't even have a right question. But we ask that you will watch over this land of the Bible, this place where our Lord walked, and bring this to the best resolution as is possible in a circumstance where justice must be found along with mercy somehow, and that a healthy, positive resolution and a new world may come from it. But we fear the outcome could be really terrible. So in any case, watch over your land. May Saint Michael the Archangel watch over Israel. And may we prayerfully hold up all the peoples who are going to be affected by this furtherance of this war. And we pray this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, gentlemen. God bless you all. I'll end the recording.
Have a great day, guys.
You all